of Ethan Chapin. And the state further prays that these sentences be ordered to run consecutively, back to back, not at the same time, to recognize and respect the unique individuality of each of these beautiful young people whose lives were taken brutally and for no reason. And hopefully now, as we have heard earlier this morning, it is time to afford the families and the friends and the community and the state of Idaho and the nation and the world to move forward. We can't undo, and we can never undo, the horror of what occurred on the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022 at 1122 King Street in Moscow, Idaho. For a long time, the presiding district judge in Latah County was John Stegner, who eventually became a member and a justice of the Idaho Supreme Court. And Justice Stegner often observed that even God cannot change the past. But everyone in this room has the ability to take themselves forward. And we want the judicial system to afford them the opportunity today to do that. From today forward, our memories should be focused on these innocent victims whose lives were taken, on their families, on their friends, on the community. The court has heard discussion, talk today, reminiscences today about a special family that our victims shared, not just their natural, legal, and biological families, not just their university family within their sororities, for example. But this family. This is the picture taken on November 12th, 2022, of the special family of 1122 King Road. And you can see all 6 of these dynamic, vibrant, loving, special, innocent faces taken together just across the street from their residence, and barely 12 hours before 4 of them would be brutally murdered in their sleep. They've been described consistently as being bright, caring, vivacious, with futures we can only imagine now. But they were, and they remain, a special family that I think we should all recognize and appreciate. So it's time to move forward. There have been a number of statements directed specifically at the defendant today. I have one last thought. After Your Honor imposes judgment and sentences the defendant to spend the rest of his life in prison, in other words, sentence the defendant to die in prison, he's going to stand up in the belly chains and the leg irons that he's wearing today, and he's going to be escorted into the custody of the Idaho Department of Correction. And the door will close behind him forever. That is the closure that we seek, that all of these people, these loving friends and family deserve, so that we can move forward. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, does the defense have evidence to present today? All right. Does defense wish to make argument today?
Your Honor, we do not wish to make arguments. Mr. Kohberger, along with his legal team, is prepared for the court to enter judgment.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, you have an opportunity to make a statement if you wish to. I take it you are declining.
I respectfully decline.
Well, please. All right, let me start this morning by acknowledging and thanking those that have come here today in support of their loved ones, and I appreciate your courage and your strength. And I hope that you are able to move on as best as possible. Thank counsel for the professionalism that they've exhibited throughout this case. It has been my great honor to preside in this case and to help bring, to the extent possible, some resolution and hopefully justice to this case. During the quiet morning hours of November 13, 2022, a faceless coward breached the tranquility of 6 beautiful young people and senselessly slaughtered them, 4 of them. Who committed this unspeakable evil was unknown for several weeks, but due to the killer's incompetence and outstanding police work by numerous local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, the person that slithered through that sliding glass door at 1122 King Road now stands before the world and this court unmasked. This unfathomable and senseless act of evil has caused immeasurable pain and loss. No parent should ever have to bury their child. This is the greatest tragedy that can be inflicted upon a person. Parents who took their children to college in a truck filled with moving boxes had to bring them home in hearses lined with coffins. The loss this killer inflicted was not just the death of these people's children, siblings, grandchildren, as we've heard today. It has ripped a hole in their soul, destroying a special part of their very essence. Any person who is a parent defines themselves foremost as such. It is their existence and purpose of being. And it has been stolen from these parents. None of us have experienced the loss these victims have in the unspeakable way that they have. And therefore, none of us can, nor should we, question the way in which they have handled their loss. Whether that be in private mourning, removed as far as possible from this media circus, or in front of a camera demanding retribution with the loudest megaphone. I've listened intently to the stories and pain that have been shared today, with great awe at the courage and resilience of the surviving family members of those wonderful children. I've listened also to the surviving roommates, both in person and through their friends. And I can't think of how, frankly, courageous they have been despite the hell that they have faced by uncaring people who have come up with all kinds of crazy theories about two kids simply being kids. The parents, siblings, and other family members who have spoken today are designated as victims in our legal system. But going forward, I hope that they can shed that label, as it gives too much power to the evil that condemned them to that role. They are and should be known as survivors, fighters, and foremost as witnesses to the tremendous lives of value and unbounded promise of these four young people. But those speaking today and those who did not speak, but who carry this same burden, this same loss, now carry forward the memories of these now perpetually young people, these forever children. These survivors carry the responsibility of ensuring that the voices of these children, Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, are never forgotten, and the positive impacts that they have had on so many lives are never minimized, and that the love they shared, the light that they shined onto others, is forever celebrated. As we sit here today, this case is ending, and we are now certain who committed these unspeakable acts of evil, but we don't know, and what we may never know is why. I share the desire expressed by others to understand the why. But upon reflection, it seems to me, and this is just my own opinion, that by continuing to focus on why, we continue to give Mr. Kohberger relevance. We give him agency and we give him power. The need to know what is inherently not understandable makes us dependent upon the defendant to provide us with a reason, and that gives him the spotlight, the attention, and the power he appears to crave. Yet even if I could force him to speak, which legally I cannot, how could anyone ever be assured that what he speaks is the truth? Do we really believe, after all of this, he's capable of speaking the truth or of giving up something of himself to help the very people whose lives he destroyed? Rather, I suspect the so-called reason would be dished out in enticing, self-serving, and aggrandizing untruthful bits, leaving people wanting more information, more insight, and thus enhancing even further the power he seeks to hold. Even if we could get truthful insight into his why, I suspect it would not in any way quench one's thirst for actually understanding why in the first instance. Because there is no reason for these crimes that could approach anything resembling rationality. No conceivable reason could make any sense. And in the end, the more we struggle to seek explanation for the unexplainable, the more we try to extract a reason, the more power and control we give to him. In my view, the time has now come to end Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration. I know there has been concern about him collaborating on books or movies or other media projects, and I truly hope that someone does not stoop to affording him this spotlight that he desires in the name of clicks, royalties, or profits. While criminal behavioralists should study him away from the spotlight in an attempt to prevent other would-be killers from acting on their worst impulses, there should be no need for that to spill over into the public eye. The great Idaho jurist Edward Lodge was known for trying to find something positive about every person he ever sentenced. And with over a half a century as a trial judge, that was a lot of people. This was often challenging, and I recall in one case he said that the best he could come up with was the defendant had good penmanship. Truth be told, I'm unable to come up with anything redeeming about Mr. Kohberger because his grotesque acts of evil have buried and hidden anything that might have been good or intrinsically human about him. His actions have made him the worst of the worst. Even in pleading guilty, he is giving nothing hinting of remorse or redemption, nothing suggesting even a recognition or understanding, let alone regret for the pain that he has caused. And therefore, I will not attempt to speak about him further, other than to simply sentence him so that he is forever removed from civilized society. And accordingly, based upon his conduct and based upon the record before this court, recognizing the standards that govern this court's sentencing decisions as set forth in State v. Toohill, I hereby sentence Mr. Kohberger as follows. On count 1, burglary, 10 years fixed, 0 years indeterminate. I also impose a fine of $50,000. Count 2, first-degree murder of Madison Mogen. I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. On count 3, for first-degree murder of Kaylee Goncalves, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the victim of the family, or to the family of the victim, pardon me. On count 4, for the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. On count 5, for the first-degree murder of Chapin, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. The sentences on counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 shall run consecutively to one another. Restitution will be left open for 60 days. Defendant will be required to submit a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression to the Department of Corrections and comply with the DNA Database Act. I remand the defendant to the custody of the Idaho State Board of Corrections for to be imprisoned in an appropriate facility in execution of the sentence where he will remain until he dies. Though you have waived your right to appeal, you do have a right to file a notice of appeal, and any such appeal must be filed within 42 days of the date of the written judgment, which will be entered shortly hereafter. Though the appeal, you should be aware, may be deemed a violation of the plea agreement, and so I certainly suggest you discuss that with counsel if that is your desire. I ask the media and public present to allow the families to be escorted out first before they leave. Again, thank you to everyone for your stories today. I am strengthened by them, and I am encouraged by your humanity and strength, and God bless you. We're adjourned.
got to clear. Yeah, I my bike. What shot is 188? Right now, he's all this is coming out. We don't know if he's going to approach the lights or not, but he's coming out. Down in front. As a prelude, it's been a long and emotional morning, so please show some grace to the families as they answer your questions. Thanks so much.
Well, it's almost been 3 years, and today's the end of a long, hard-fought battle. But we have our person, and we have him where he belongs. So for that, we are thankful for all the men and women that put the work together, put this case together, and once it's part of the court system, it was a little ugly, but we got that conviction, and we're glad to be moving on. Glad we can move on.
Steve, the family or the judge talked about how we may never know a lie, and it may not be worth it to try to answer the lie with something so sensitive. That makes sense to me. What do you feel about that?
There's some truth to that, but then, you know, there's also the fact that, I mean, what would he tell as a lie as to opposed to the truth, you know? So
The knife, if he gave the knife up, or if he gave a part of his kill kit, if he gave out facts that only the killer would know,
it would corroborate things.
it would corroborate things. And he even addressed there's been way too many conspiracies, and the surviving witnesses had to go through hell. Well, no better way to protect them than by getting some of those details. If you got those details, then, you know, it's as simple as just saying I did it solo would have been, you know, valuable, I think. And you know, we stand by the negotiation wasn't justice. It was just a shortcut, and we said from the very beginning we're not interested in a shortcut for our daughter. You know, and we wanted everything.
Steve, you turned the podium at one point. Talk to us about why you wanted to stare him in the face.
Because he's a coward. He's been protected by the court from day one, the minute that he was arrested. So I wanted to let him know that I was directing everything towards him, and you know, his days of being protected are coming to an end. You know, from what I've been explained, he gets on a van today, and he's got like 12-minute ride, and then he'll be the responsibility of Idaho State.
Were you planning on turning the podium, though, or did you do that?
You know, I remember reading it saying, "Do not move." So I was like, "Well, I'm moving this." I just kind of made that decision right then and there. So, you know, want to make it as difficult as possible. I knew my daughter was going to do a speech, and I'd heard it, and I was like, he's going to hate this. He's going to hate this next set of people that are going to come forward and really rip into him and really expose him for what kind of a piece of trash he was. And we've been waiting a long time to say some of those things that needed to be said.
Stephen Jr., you chose not to speak. Speak now. Is there anything you can say?
I'd written up a statement. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe this is where you go.
Okay. Well, allow me a second.
Maybe it wasn't court appropriate.
Yeah, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't. Yeah, my name's Stephen Goncalves. I'm Kaylee's older brother. She was my little sister, my friend, the middle child in the heart of our family. There are no words that can fully describe her spirit, but if you knew her, you knew joy, you knew light, you knew someone who made everything better just by being in the room. My statement was largely grounded in one goal, and that was to do everything for anyone who listens to this and has to go through something similar to not have to endure what we had. My family's fought tirelessly, not just for answers, but for accountability. We've stood in front of cameras, behind closed doors, and across from people who didn't want us to speak, but we did, and we won't stop now. Across nearly every murder case prosecuted by Bill Thompson, including the killing of University of Idaho football player Eric McMillan, there is a clear and troubling pattern. Families are left feeling unheard, justice is negotiated down through plea deals, and the public is left with unanswered questions. In the McMillan case, charges were reduced from first-degree to second-degree murder, prompting confusion and outrage from the victim's family and community. The same pattern is emerged in the Silas Parks and John Lee cases, both of which prosecuted by Bill Thompson, where capital-eligible crimes were resolved through plea agreements, sidestepping trials and diminishing public accountability. The most egregious of these crimes was the brutal killing of Whitney Parks, a young pregnant woman whose life was taken by her husband Silas Parks during a violent domestic assault. Whitney was only 22 years old. Whitney was beaten and strangled in her own home, an act of cruelty that not only ended her life, but also the life of her unborn child. And yet, despite the devastating nature of this crime, Bill Thompson reduced the charges from murder to voluntary manslaughter, ultimately securing a sentence that allowed Parks the possibility of parole after just 5 years. There was no trial, no full accounting of what Whitney endured, no acknowledgement in the legal outcomes of the child she was carrying. For Whitney's family, and for anyone who believes that justice systems should speak forcefully for victims, this wasn't justice. It was a deal, and it was like so many others under Thompson's watch. It prioritized expedience over accountability. Now, almost predictably, we find ourselves reliving that pattern in the current case. Despite the magnitude and brutality of the crime, the prosecution chose to accept a plea deal behind closed doors, without trial, without ever consulting our family in any meaningful way. In fact, we learned from the plea deal that had been finalized from an email from the prosecution team. Not in person, not with warning, not with respect. That moment underscored what we feared all along, and that this case was following the same well-worn path toward expedience over justice. Sentencing once again fails to reflect the severity of the act, and the emotional fallout has landed again on the shoulders of the victims' families, who have been left out, unheard, and grieving not just a horrific loss, but a system that continues to bypass them. The through line is undeniable. Whether it's 2004 or 2025, this prosecutional, is that a word? Sorry. Prosecutional approach has consistently abandoned the very approach it is, or the very people it is supposed to protect. The trend you'll notice from Thompson's prosecuted crime are the following: plea bargains avoiding capital punishment, charge reductions, sentences that misalign with the gravity of the crime, lack of trial due to plea bargains. These aren't just failures in process, they're failures that have real consequences for real people. After reviewing Bill Thompson's history, it's clear our family was never given a fair chance at justice. But this isn't just about a prosecutor's record. It's about Kaylee. It's about my sister. She's not just one of the Idaho 4. She was a daughter, a sister, a best friend, and the light in every room she walked into. When the prosecution followed the same path we've seen before, closed doors, limited input, in a plea deal handed down without our voice, it became painfully clear that Kaylee was being treated just like another case. But she wasn't. She was everything to us, and our pain has only deepened, knowing that the system didn't fight for her the way she deserved. I'll leave everyone with this. There's 1,000 things I wish I could say to Kaylee, but today I'll just say this. I will always carry her with me for the rest of my life, and I will never stop being her brother.
Steve,
Thank you.
Now that the gag order is lifted, is there anything that you've learned over the last 2.5 years from the investigators or the prosecutors that you can share with us now that you can speak about?
Well, I think it was kind of interesting that once the president sent a truth statement out, they called us right up and they told us everything. So I don't know what was holding them back before, but we spent about 3 hours, close to 3 hours with the lead detectives, and yeah, we found because our main thing was we didn't want to have victims advocate statements that had lies and misquotes and misinformation in it. So I appreciate the president, putting a little bit of pressure on there, and it seemed to work. Up until that time, they told us they were not going to tell us, and we were going to have to just wait for for the things to be unsealed. But yeah, it was horrific what Kaylee went through. Yeah, and I don't want to protect this guy, but I won't give out all the details. I'll be general, but yeah, she was stabbed over 30 plus times, and she was struck, and there was quite a bit of damage to her face. So this guy's just an absolute monster. Anyone who thinks that he's otherwise, I just looked at pure demons out there. When I was looking at him, we had a stare down, and he's just filled with demons. He's dark pits of eyes, and there's something seriously wrong with that man.
Steve, why was it important for you to look him directly in the eyes? And what did you see as you spoke to him?
I looked him straight in the eyes, and I just seen black holes and just anger at me. He was telling me with his face that he fucking hated me. He absolutely fucking hated me.
And why did you want to speak to him directly that way?
It's the most personal one. Like,
Yeah,
look at me in my eye. You took my daughter's life. Look at me.
Yeah,
Did your family get something today that it needed, or was this?
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's a little early to actually even answer that for myself. I think that kind of stuff needs to set in and sink in, and you regret maybe saying some things, or you wish that you would have said things. So I think right now we're just kind of in the mix of the tornado, and the real feelings.
As the spotlight then fades, what do you want the public to remember?
Our main thing is hopefully this could be a template for another family that, you can use the media as much as they're using you. You can use it to keep people accountable, keep people honest, keep the court system, treating you with a little bit of respect. And I think that's what we did. And the more that you get active, I think the more chance that you're going to get that justice in the end. I think you really got to try to make your kids stand out, or whoever you're trying to protect, you make them real. Get on the internet and talk to people.
Before you go, and I know you want to go, I want to ask, Olivia today was spectacular. But Olivia asked the question, what was the other weapon you used on my sister? Despite this meeting you had with prosecutors, there still sounds like there's something you don't know there. Can you explain that to us?
No, we do know that another weapon was used on Kaylee. So we don't know what that weapon was. But
They didn't recover it.
along with the knife wasn't recovered, but Kaylee was not just stabbed. There was other things that happened to Kaylee.
Talk about that a little. The conversation we had with the prosecution was about healing more than anything. It was about giving the victims' families answers. And they may share some of that information at a later date, but today is not the day for that. Today is about the sentencing. It's about putting the defendant in prison for the rest of his life. So there may be more details to come about that, but that conversation that they had was about the healing process and finding some answers that they had. And so we may share at a later date, but today's not the day. Okay?
Thank you guys for being available.
Thanks.
Shannon.
Good afternoon. My name is Leander James. I am the pro bono attorney for Karen Laramie and Scott Laramie, the loving mother and stepfather of Madison Mogen. I ask that you please give your quiet attention to Scott. He would like to make a statement to you and to all those out there in support of them and the other families. Thank you.
Karen and I just left the sentencing where we gave our victim impact statement. Judge Hippler sentenced the defendant to the maximum allowable sentence under the plea agreement. The sentence will ensure that this evil will never again terrorize a family as he did ours and 3 others. The trial would have involved risks. Had the defendant been convicted, he may not have been given the death penalty. Had he been convicted of the death penalty, we would have had to endure years, maybe even decades of appeals. This way, his fate is sealed. Society is protected, and we can move on with our lives and attempt to recover. Maddie was our purpose and our hope. We remain lost without her, but we will find our way. Thank you. Get up.
Thank you.
Which soundbite is that? not have anything to do. Can you just tell me what it is?
Bryan and Justin was absolutely packed members, of course, of the victim's family and friends, as well as members of the media. It's just so hard to believe. This is a story that affected real people, real families, real friends, and we are seeing and hearing from many of them for the first time. One of the survivors remains. We are also hearing from a victim in Boise that was right under acid test debunked by her friend Emily Alon. And that's how the hearing started. It was really emotional. Both girls, both Emily and Dylan, very, very choked up, reading these statements saying they felt this immense amount of guilt. And they deal with this incredible anxiety still every single day. But they know they need to move forward. They know they need to live for their friends because their friends can no longer live. Beyond that, we heard from the families of Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle. As more and more people read the written impact statements, more and more people started clapping for them. Just goes to show how powerful those statements were. Some people commenting in the back, really
throughout this entire hearing today, he stared directly at the people that were at the podium talking, whether they were addressing him or whether they were addressing the judge, speaking from their notes. He was staring emotionless, really, as sobs could be heard from all over the courtroom. I was sitting behind Hunter Johnson and Emily Mark, two friends of the victims, who know based on other reporting that they were to call 911 that day. And Hunter grabbing tissue, stabbing his eyes. At the end of this hearing, you guys saw Bill Thompson put up photos of each of the victims, ensuring that their individual stories were not hidden, ensuring that we put face to the name. They're not the Idaho story. It's not some story for our kids to share. He put up each of their photos. He put up a photo of all of the victims, and he said, "This is a special family, and for you guys to remember, this is a special family, and this we recommend consecutive life sentences in prison." That is exactly what it is. Yeah, you know, to give you a picture of what it looks like in the courtroom from the family members and friends that I know of, Xana Kernodle and I believe her brothers were sitting in the front row, right side of the courtroom. Next to her was Madison Mogen, her grandmother, who also died sitting, and behind them were Dylan Mortensen, again one of the surviving roommates, as well as his friend, the victims. Behind them were the Mogen family, so Ben Mogen was actually in the front row as well, alongside Xana Kernodle, but then behind the friend was their family, so Scott here and there, then Madison, and behind them
except for certain and his wife. I don't know. Pick that up. I know. Probably not to him since he knows.
Our words today, but with our commitment to protecting others in their memory. I will never stop fighting for the people of Idaho, and I thank every single member of this community who has just reached out to the families and supported them. And may God bless the souls of the victims and the families who have suffered.
Thank you. Now we will transition into our question and answer phase. Joining me at the podium will be Bill Thompson from the prosecutor's office and the two lead investigators, Brett Payne and Darren Robertson. Just a couple of things before we begin. We recognize that everyone has a lot of questions. We're going to try to do our best to answer as many as we possibly can. Also, keep in mind that there are still some things that we are unable to talk about because of either privacy interests of the victims and their families and where they are under seal currently in the court. So if those items do come up, then that will certainly be the answer that you will receive. And to keep this sort of orderly, I will try to be the one to point out who's got their hands up. And the mic's
Chief Dollinger, Amanda Rowley with CREM 2 in Spokane. What more can you tell us about the release documents that the police department is working on putting online, and what can we expect from that?
Certainly. As we put out that press release, I hope everybody can understand the immense amount of information that's in this investigation. It's going to take a lot of time to prepare. It has to be gone through legally to be redacted or figured out whether or not it can actually be released. So I did get word today. It sounds like our website will be going live hopefully this afternoon. There should be another press release coming out in the next few hours to show that website so that people can start accessing that. Initially, what is going to be on there, and certainly this is just for the Moscow Police Department because we're only the holders of our records, but it will be all of our police reports from this investigation. So just the documents there. They'll be redacted, ready to go, again, free of charge for the public. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can, so we wanted to get those out there.
Chief, from the very beginning, your department was saying this was a targeted attack. Can you now say who was the target and what's your evidence to show that?
I'll turn that question over to the investigators to answer that one.
Well, I think Darren and I have, the evidence suggested that there was a reason that this particular house was chosen. What that reason is, we don't know. We don't know who the target was, and we're not going to speculate on that up here today. But we can tell you that for whatever reason, Mr. Kohberger chose that residence. Perhaps it's the location, layout, we don't know. But that's, to the best of my knowledge, that's what that statement might be.
During Haley got the third page Q, there was a social media account that surfaced that has long had speculation that it was Bryan Kohberger. Can you talk at all about the Papa Roger potential connection, if any?
Right. There was no connection. There wasn't at all. We looked into every bit of it. We took a deep dive into it. We researched it.
So it wasn't him?
It was not. It was not. Thank you. Cut that off.
Is it possible that there was a second murder weapon used, not just the knife?
Is it possible? All the evidence shows and tells us that he used a knife, a K-bar knife, and that's a weapon we believe was used to commit all the murders.
It sounded like the Goncalves family said that there was a second weapon that was used on Kaylee Goncalves. Can you confirm or deny that?
Out of respect for the families, that's something that you'll have to get from them. If they wish to share that with you, then probably do that afterwards.
Thank you. And one more question. You said that it seemed like he chose that house. There's no clues as to why he chose that house?
You know, after working in Moscow for several years as Chief Dollinger, that area is frequented by many, many people at all hours of the night when college is in session. So what Darren and I have surmised is that perhaps it's the old hiding in plain sight. There's lots of people around, there's lots of vehicles around at all hours. It's not isolated where you'd be noticed, so that's where that comment comes from.
It does, and though it doesn't make sense, and it's if you were in that neighborhood at all, it's a very complicated neighborhood. It's very closed in. But at the same time, there's everything from college kids to adults that live there, people that have full-time jobs, part-time jobs. So any one of us could come and go and fit in there. So, Frederick.
DA Thompson, during the plea hearing and then again today, it seemed like your voice quivered a bit when you were either putting up photographs or mentioning victims' names. I'm just wondering about the emotional toll on one of them.
Yeah, you're right. My voice was quivering. Y'all were in there. There's a lot of powerful emotion. Losses are almost indescribable. And maybe my filters aren't as good as they might have been 45 years ago when I started in this business. But I think you also saw that even Judge Hippler was affected and impacted by this. There's no easy way to remain stiff-lipped and dry-eyed through this kind of tragedy. There just simply isn't.
I'm sure you're not aware of this yet, but there was a photograph, or they zoomed in on a picture that Bryan Kohberger had on the defense counsel table. It was an image of a black heart. I don't know if you heard this or you've seen the image. Hearing this, your thoughts?
First I've heard of it. There is something I need to say to real quick. This is the product of, I'm sure I'm getting old in my failed memory, but there's one other person I need to recognize, and this is very important to us because this was the key person that was going to take us through trial. And that's Josh Herward, former United States Attorney for the District of Idaho, who left office and voluntarily joined our office as a special deputy to help us. My apologies for the oversight, as I wasn't reading my notes correctly. But thank you for that little interlude.
I guess my question is for Mr. Thompson, since you're still up there, Antoinette Levy with Law and Crime. You said that it was your decision to accept this plea agreement. It brings finality, people die in prison, but Corporal Payne just said they don't know who the target was and why he targeted this house. Was there a reason why, as part of the plea agreement, you didn't require Ann Taylor to have her clients sit down with you all and to answer some of these questions?
I think that Judge Hippler addressed that today very, very well, which Judge Hippler addresses everything very well, we found. The law does not give the court or us the power to require a specific factual allocation. And just let me finish. And we recognize that. We recognize that we could have said, well, in order for us to move forward, we want a factual allocution. But I have to be perfectly candid. I don't believe that there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would be the truth. I don't believe that there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would be anything other than self-serving. And I don't believe there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would not further victimize the families. And so that just simply wasn't a factor. We made our decision based on our assessment of law and the facts. We made our decision based on being able to obtain accountability and certainty, not just for the victims' families, but for the communities and for the state. And that's where our obligations go. In the end, when the old Harry Truman thing, the buck stops on my desk, well, that's what I got when I was elected prosecutor 33 years ago. I never dreamed it would involve something like this. But we don't shirk our responsibilities just because it got big and nasty.
Thank you. Corporal Kane and Lieutenant Wilson, first of all, I want to say to you, Corporal Kane, that the Chapin family told me that you called them every night during that nearly 7-week manhunt, even though you didn't have to. And I just think that that goes to show the folks don't care what you think of this. So, that being said, I'm curious as to where you think or believe the murder weapon is, where you think or believe the clothes Kohberger was wearing that night are, and how do you think he avoided forensics at the scene?
Well, I can just tell you, and forgive us if we go back and forth, it's just kind of how we roll. There is no evidence that we found that would lead us to any specific, even general location as to where the murder weapon or the clothes have been. And we searched. I mean, the FBI, again, to their credit, we had folks doing soil samples and so all sorts of things to try to come up with somewhere to start searching for these things, and we just never found it. As far as the forensics piece, I'll let Darren.
Yeah, and on the weapon, it wasn't a lack of trying. You know, everywhere that we had evidence of where he went, based upon phone records, based upon the evidence that we had gathered, we searched that. We went there. We did searches on the ground, in the water. We did searches. We sent soil samples to try to figure out maybe where a shovel had been used. So we searched everywhere that we possibly could, but the reality is we're looking for a singular small, it's not that small, but K-bar knife. That's it. So it's endless of where it could have been, and we just were not able to find it. So.
What about the close in his ability, though, to avoid forensics at the scene, in a murder scene where we now know Kaylee Goncalves was stabbed 34 times and that another victim was stabbed more than
Right. So the reality is that somebody can carry this out and still not get covered in blood. That's the reality of it, and this does happen, and there's plenty of studies of that. And we've had some of the world's experts that we've asked those same questions, because we've struggled with that. Why do we not find more here and there? And the reality was, if somebody has the training, if somebody has thought about it, if somebody wears the right type of clothing, then that could be the outcome. That's what we were left with. Here.
Jean Casares with CNN. Mr. Thompson, did you do psychological testing on Bryan Kohberger? Did that weigh into your decision to have a plea deal? And stabbings, multiple stabbings are very personal. How did you assess that mode of murder?
I can tell you that psychological testing was done, Mr. Kohberger. The results of that do not rise to a defense to its conduct under Idaho law. The results of the various testing, most of it done by the defense on behalf. That's also sealed by court order, so I can't speak to any specifics, but I can tell you, yes, psychological testing was done. I can also tell you that no, psychological testing or any potential psychological issues did not play a role in our decision.
Bill, does it have any bearing on where people will be placed or housed?
Where Mr. Kohberger, where the defendant is going to be housed is going to be up to the Idaho Department of Correction. And that could very well change over time. And the reality is we will know about it after it happens.
Did you monitor Mr. Kohberger's communications while he was incarcerated? And did he say anything that was helpful or give you any insight as to why he did this?
Yeah, we did monitor both while he was housed and once he was in the county.
Hundreds, thousands of hours of monitoring that was done, but there was nothing of evidentiary value that was gained from any of it.
Will you be releasing those conversations?
It's my understanding that the jail will not be releasing things that involve personal conversations with third parties. That ultimately would be a decision because the recordings are in possession of the two correctional facilities or detention facilities. But I'm pretty certain the Latah County Sheriff's Office policy does not allow for that, and I would guess Ada County is similar. You can ask them.
Back here.
Thank you. Greg Fisher with CBS News 48 Hours. Was there any evidence that Kohberger was following the social media of any of the victims?
So, trust us, we wanted that to be the case. We've looked for a link, and we have not found one. Not one.
Yeah, through the entire investigation, I think that's something that we need, that you want, is to help to understand this and say, well, what's the connection? What was the link? And so we had every resource possible, and we worked that tirelessly, both from everything from his side, but all the victims and all the members of the House from their side. So we have never, to this date, found a single connection between him and any of the 4 victims or the 2 surviving roommates.
Michael Ruiz from Fox News Digital. My questions for the investigators. You guys are going through this case. You got a lot of evidence about his background, his education, his training. You know, you said earlier you couldn't identify a reason the house was targeted. Do you have a motive?
We don't.
Lauren Patterson, Northwest Public Broadcasting. This question's for Anthony Gallagher, actually. I remember when Anthony was a beat cop assigned to talk to us at the very beginning when all of this happened, and now you're running the show. So I wanted to ask, as
It's changed everyone involved. How could it not? It was a devastating tragedy to our community, and our police department is a part of that community, and it was very difficult for us as well. So, but it is certainly a part of our history that we will never forget. Yes.
level of interest in a court case like this in Idaho matched by an extremely high level of secrecy in the case. The Gonzalez family has said that they're desperate for answers about what happened to their daughter. Do you anticipate most of the court documents being unsealed, or are there things that you will specifically request remain sealed?
As far as the court documents, Judge Hipler has told us that he is going to work with the attorneys to go through every sealed document. Many, probably most of the documents were sealed for the purpose of protecting against tainting a jury pool. And those documents I would expect would become unsealed. Requests for discovery, various things like that. There are also documents in there that contain very personal, private information regarding victims and families. I expect those likely will not be released under Idaho's protections against what the law calls unwarranted invasions of personal privacy. I realize that can be frustrating for folks who want to be able to explore this thoroughly, but we have to balance, and the law balances, the privacy of the people who have suffered, including the victims who are dead, with giving the public as much information as we responsibly can.
Alex Duggan, the spokesman review. I'm just wondering, did a lack of knowing the reason or the motive concern you when prepping for trial? Because juries tend to want to explore the motive or reason for a crime. And also, how do you as investigators and attorneys grapple with that? Because if you can't rationalize something irrational, then how do you continue knowing that you won't get an answer?
Well, I'll tell you from an investigator standpoint, we already know and realize we often don't get to know that. We want it. We all do. We naturally want that. But the reality is it's not something that we have to have or that we get. And the reality also is that oftentimes those very things that you're asking about, they're only known to one person. It's a person that commits those crimes. And I think that's probably what we have here.
And I would add that going through this whole investigation, I'd probably say it's easier than it was for Bill's offices. We were focused on a task. We had a task to do, and it was discovering evidence and interviewing folks and that sort of thing. So the motive necessarily doesn't play a part in that, right? Obviously it can, but we were just focused on getting the job done in the correct way as best we could. So.
And from the prosecutor's point of view, yeah, certainly lack of a clear motive is something that we think about and consider as we're preparing for trial, because we're going to have a jury of 12, ordinary, honest citizens there who are wanting to figure this thing out. But we also, and I've also found that juries tend to follow the law. And even jurors who come in with strong feelings, they tend to follow the law that the judge gives. And there is no element of motive in Idaho law for murder. And so we set that aside as something that we were going to dwell on. Whether there was clear proof of a specific motive, because we knew it wasn't legally required, and practically speaking, we knew it wasn't something that we possessed that we could give to the jury without speculating. And I'm sure as heck not going to stand in front of a bunch of 12 jurors and start speculating. We're going to give them the evidence. And the evidence in this case, what you heard at the time of his guilty plea back on the 2nd, that evidence was compelling, and it showed his guilt without having to worry about motive in a human sense. But thank you for the question.
Did he say anything when he was arrested?
Yeah, so Brett, myself, and members of the FBI, we traveled back to Pennsylvania. We were there, and I know they hit on it earlier, but I'd be remiss without talking about the cooperation and the support that we had from them was absolutely incredible. From the time that we got on the ground, with the Pennsylvania State Police and with the FBI back there, it was unbelievable. Anything that we needed, they were there to facilitate it. So we helped to shape what that looked like, what the arrest looked like, what took place once they hit the house on the search warrant and he was taken into custody. Brett and I were at another location, a barracks of the Pennsylvania State Police, and then he was brought to us and we conducted an interview with him that night there in Pennsylvania.
Can you talk about what he said?
So we went into this interview, we used a lot of influence and guidance from the FBI and their behavioral analysis unit. They helped us a ton in framing our our interview strategy rather. When we spoke to Mr. Kohberger, we kept it pretty surface level to begin with, the idea being get him to speak and keep him speaking. It was pretty surface level, and then when we tried to get into things a bit more detail, he decided to end the interview. So that's pretty much
as soon as we tried to walk into the purpose of why we're there, which obviously he knows we're detectives from Idaho, so that's when we really started to shut down, and then he just shut it down. So
What was his demeanor?
Calm, relaxed.
Say very similar to what you see and whenever you see him in court.
Next question.
Yeah, Mike Baker from the New York Times. I'm wondering if you can talk about Mr. Kohberger's family, whether you got much cooperation, tips, input from them along the way.
The only thing I'm really able to talk about is that we didn't get any tips or any evidentiary items from the family. So, down to that?
No.
Just wondering if you ever had any idea of what made Mr. Kohberger take the plea deal in the end?
No.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up? I know there were reports.
That was a short answer. You probably have time for a short follow-up.
Can I also ask a follow-up to the investigators? I know there were some reports that there was Kohberger was hiding some container out in the house. Did you ever determine what that was?
No, and the belief was in one of the surviving roommates in her statement, and that's out there, was that she observed something in his hand when she saw him, but we don't know what it was.
You had an expert who was going to testify about cleaning something off of his work computer, some software experts. Was there any evidence that he had tried to wipe anything from his phone, software-wise? The Barn particularly is their name.
Yeah, and so this kind of goes into the connection to the victims as well. That's a similar question. We had the world's foremost experts on this look into it, and there was evidence that he had used software to wipe many of his devices relatively effectively, so there wasn't much evidence obtained after that.
Including, I think he had two softwares, or was it just the one software?
I think he had one active phone, but I don't remember, so don't quote me
either.
if he had more at his home
So
or office.
it was more than just the work computer that he had wiped with the
Yeah,
software?
he regularly used software to try to clear things off. He used VPN on his devices also.
Okay, back here. Kevin Fixler with the Idaho Statesman. I'm hoping you can walk us through the decision to hand off the DNA process on the knife sheath over to Offram Labs, who's contracted by ISP, and then ultimately the FBI takes over that IgG process. And then Prosecutor Thompson, I'm curious if you had concerns about constitutional rights issues based on how the FBI conducted themselves in that portion.
I'll start, and I'll just speak briefly to, when we were notified that we had a DNA from the knife sheath, and it was a single source male DNA, touch DNA, then we knew that we had capabilities to take that further. So you're correct, the Idaho State Police has a contract with Offram Laboratories in Texas. So we flew that over there, and they started the process of working that in what was the beginning of the IgG process. And at some point during it, we were working with the FBI, which we did closely throughout the entire case and every aspect of it. We talked and met with them, and they had further resources and some capabilities that we thought may get us somewhere quicker. And so we made the decision to then shift that to the FBI and continue that process there.
And as to your question about legal concerns, my simple answer is no. I didn't have legal concerns about how the FBI conducted their IGG investigation. I know that was the subject of lengthy, detailed, painfully detailed motions and briefing, and Mr. Nye rose to the occasion and was able to address all of that. But in the end, it's simply no different than sending somebody undercover into any place to gather information. And I was not concerned about the legality of it. And the judge came through and made the right decision that there was no violation of the defendant's rights or anybody else's rights.
Had he not left the knife sheath behind, would you have been able to track him down?
We've talked about this ad nauseum, and the answer is yes. Through the car, most likely. We had some amazing people going truly line by line over tens of thousands of white Hyundai Elantras. So we believe we would have got to it through that avenue. The time frame for that is uncertain. It could have been a week later, could have been 2 months later. We just don't know. We would have found him. We would have found him.
There's a lot of questions in regards to that initial window. Brett and I made the decision on what that window was, even though the experts were saying there may be more years that match it, but the simple numbers that we began to look at were astronomical, of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of these vehicles. So we chose to try to narrow it and start smaller, and then as we had to, we were going to open that up. But we both believe we would have gotten him through the car eventually.
A question for Mr. Thompson. Amanda Rowley with Crum 2. It appears that the plea deal, it felt a bit rushed. So the question is, why did it happen so quickly, considering some of the families were against it? And also, the Mogen family at the plea hearing mentioned saying that this is the best possible outcome. Just wondering, do you agree with that, or would you have liked to have seen a different outcome?
Well, I think we agree with the Mogen family. Our decision was that this is the best possible outcome, all things considered, and factoring into that the defendant was prepared to plead guilty as charged. Now, if that hadn't been a factor, we'd be picking a jury for trial starting right now, or starting this week. What was the first part?
Why was this such a quick? It felt rushed. So why did this happen so quickly, even though the family?
No, I hear you. The process moved quickly. There was no doubt about it. And like I outlined for the court earlier today, things changed dynamically the week following the June 18th hearings on the defense motion for a continuance and the alternate perpetrator motion, where Judge Hippler made it very clear that the defense was not going to prevail on either of those. And so the reality of trial was there, and there was nothing else in its way. We were continuing to prepare for trial. We had been doing that for months, and as I mentioned, that's you bringing Mr. Hurwitz in to help us because the Attorney General's office was not able, with the manpower, to help us all the way through trial. We were ready to go. When we were approached by the defense about the possibility of a plea, our first question was, is your client prepared to plead guilty? And it took them a little while to give us that answer. In the meantime, we reached out to the families, and we talked to the families, and we solicited their input, and we considered that in making our decision. The fact of the matter is, and I think Judge Hippler commented on this back on July 2nd when we were in court, is that the logistics of the upcoming trial, with 10,000 prospective jurors being summoned in, the court staff making arrangements and preparing to process that part of the case, dictated that if the case was going to resolve, it needed to resolve quickly. And so that kind of drove the pace over that weekend, the last weekend of June. At the end of the weekend, when we understood from the defense that the defendant was prepared to plead guilty, the court was notified the next morning, and the court wanted to move quickly to get a plea done on the record if it was going to be done, and if it wasn't, so we were not interrupted in our trial preparations.
So trial logistics were the main concern, just as Judge Hippler had said prior, right, with the jury as a factor and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the practical aspect is that the trial machine was running. And if it was going to be interrupted, that had to be known as soon as possible. I think that's the fairest explanation.
Okay, question here.
Yes, Michelle Panucci from 48 Hours. I just had a question about when you were looking into Kohberger's past, was there any early sign of trouble, or what did his background look like?
Well, we can't go into his younger years. I believe that's actually still under seal, and correct me if I'm wrong. But what I can tell you is the things we do know about him was that his education led him down a path that was very much focused on forensics, crime scenes, that sort of thing. So that was really what we focused on in his background, is what led him down this path. How may he have prepared for this? And I think that was a big component of that, was just his schooling and his choice of potential future profession. So.
And just so there's no speculation here by what Detective Payne just said, documents under seal involving Mr. Kohberger's background, they may or may not be released down the road. I can tell you that there is no evidence of any criminal history of any significant nature. There was no evidence of a history of violence. There was no evidence of a history of a factual predisposition to do the crimes that he committed here. So if there are any concerns among your listeners or readers that somehow he was a serial killer in waiting with all of these prior actions, we are not aware of any behaviors like that that preceded what happened here in Idaho.
We'll take this question here, and then we're going to have two more after that.
Yeah, I'm going to argue with CBS News' questions for Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, you talked about having before the plea deal was reached, including the Goncalves. Have you spoken to the Goncalves afterward about their displeasure with this, and if so, what is that conversation?
We have spoken with families afterwards, and I can tell you that families that did not agree with our decision have made that very clear to us, and I don't expect anything different. I respect, and we respect, that everyone is going to grieve differently, even within family units, and everyone is going to look at the case and possible resolutions from their own light, and they are entitled to that as victims. I'm not going to pretend that everybody was just fine with our decision, because there were families and family members who were not. And we accept that. We recognize that. It's just a fact of life.
More questions? Call on you again.
It was stated earlier that the target is unknown. However, it's been speculated that the convicted may have encountered Maddie while she was serving at the Maddie Creek restaurant due to the vegan menu options. When his digital data was analyzed, were there any location pins or any information there that could have connected him to where Maddie worked?
No, there wasn't. Like I said earlier, we wanted that. We looked for it in every possible way, digitally, financially, physical location, anything you could think of, anything that we thought, where is the connection, where's the overlap, and we searched tirelessly and never found it.
At that restaurant.
I can't say that he was never there at all, but we never found any evidence at all from interviewing everybody that we possibly could, talking to every person that would have that information to be able to show that he was there or that there was a connection through the restaurant.
Okay, last question here.
Okay, just two follow-ups to earlier questions. First of all, my question about the family. You said that you didn't get any evidence from the family. Was there any hindrance of the investigation from the family? And was there any specific evidence you were hoping to get?
Are you talking about his family, Kohberger's? Yes. There was not any hindrance, anything, nothing that impacted us carrying out the investigation.
Thank you. And then the second follow-up, when you mentioned, like, obviously you follow this line of interest in his studies, did anything in your investigation indicate that that was chosen as part of a planning process as opposed to just an area of interest?
There was nothing aside from, we have some of his coursework where he did, a crime scene recreation, that sort of thing, but it was all part of his studies. So I don't think that any of us attributed that to a planning process per se. Certainly it was a learning process, but whether or not it was a planning process ahead of what he did, we'll probably never know that.
Yeah, and I would say we didn't find anything that would be any different than a student similar, a different student in the PhD program.
Gotcha, so then I'm understanding that the planning process, that you're in the investigation that if it was part of the plan, that purchase of the AR knife on Amazon, which is the first, I guess, step toward.
Did he plan it? Did he buy it with the purpose of that? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
And we don't
have
know.
anything to show or prove that he did that.
Well, thank you all. That concludes our Q&A section today. Hopefully, we tried to get as many of you folks' questions answered as possible. I'm sure you're going to have further questions, and certainly the question was already brought up about public records requests. Just keep in mind that if you're looking for those in the future, you will need to go to each individual agency or entity that has the keepers of those records. So just to reiterate, the website that the City of Moscow is going to be putting up, hopefully today, that will only be Moscow Police Department records, and those will be our police reports. So we understand that this case has captured the attention of literally the world, and today's news conference was not held to relive the tragedy, but to honor those lives that were lost, to acknowledge the conclusion of this legal process, and to reinforce our wavering commitment to justice, a commitment we share with you. I want to take a moment to thank the members of the media here today. We understand that you do have a vital role in helping the public comprehend the intricacies of this case, and your continued professionalism in covering this emotionally charged and complex case is appreciated. No additional comments from law enforcement will be made today, and if you have further questions, please feel free to submit those through the agency's public information officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grab. Hey. The way you ask us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. Are you still shooting stuff? Yeah, I'm just... Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Hustle writing this now, and I need coffee.
I need to sit.